So Donald Trump, in an effort to cover up everything that he is doing, and now that he has been a confirmed, and when I say a confirmed, please go look up what the hell confirmed means. Donald Trump has been notified that he has been named in the Epstein files. So, this is why he does not want to put out that file because, according to this particular report, he was notified by Pam Bondi that he's actually in those files. Y'all remember he was saying he was gonna release all of this stuff, but guess what? He's not releasing it because he's in there. Now he's starting all this bullshit with telling us about, Barack Obama, and he's playing all these games with y'all because he's really a freak, and he really don't want you to know who he really is. But I don't understand like how you guys won't know or don't understand what a criminal perv that this man is when he's been convicted of it. He's been sued by a woman for, the R word. So let's kind of get into it. Donald Trump is a perv.
From Fox, I'm Andrew Kraft. Like I said before the break, a lot of news on the Jeffrey Epstein front that the Trump administration want to bring into the conversation someone who covers the Trump DOJ and FBI each and every day for the Washington Examiner. That's reporter Kaylin Deese. Kaylin joins me. Kaylin, good to see you here. There's a lot to get to, so let's get to it. We'll first start off with this major exclusive in the Wall Street Journal today that was later corroborated and confirmed by both the New York Times and Reuters. I'm reading from the piece in the Journal. I want to put up the post there on social media, on X. It goes as follows, Kaylin, that when Justice Department officials reviewed what Attorney General Pam Bondi called a truckload of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein earlier this year, they discovered that Donald Trump's name appeared multiple times. That's according to senior administration officials. In May, Bondi and her deputy, that's Todd Blanche, informed the president at a meeting in the White House that his name was in the Epstein files, the officials said. Many other, though, high-profile figures were also named. The president was told, obviously being mentioned in the records is not a sign of wrongdoing, the Journal piece reports. So we did get a statement in, as did the Wall Street Journal, from White House Communications Director Stephen Chung. He says this is another fake news story, just like the previous story by the Wall Street Journal. Let's start there. Trump, according to the Wall Street Journal, is mentioned in the Epstein files numerous times. Pam Bondi told him that. Your reaction, your reporting?
Right. So when we saw this report come out, we immediately reached out to the Justice Department and we were able to get some kind of statement from Attorney General Pam Bondi, a joint statement with Todd Blanche, her and him, as well as a statement from Kash Patel. Although the answer of whether they could confirm or deny the reporting ultimately was just met with these statements, one from Kash Patel where he essentially hits out against the fake news and, decries this story as no different from the other fake news hits that have been put out there, in his words. And then we also get this statement from Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi, sort of saying that they reached a conclusion set out in the July 6th memo. Nothing in the files warranted further investigation or prosecution. And also saying as part of our routine briefing, we made the president aware of the findings. So that is also sort of another non-answer when it comes to this. So it would seem that, this information came to the Wall Street Journal through senior administration officials. And obviously there's been a lot of corroboration that the outlet has said that came into this. So this isn't necessarily something that was always a surprise. If there is any mention of Donald Trump in the so-called Epstein files, there was always sort of an alluding to that being an issue here, as well as his name and other names that could be in there. It's why the administration has been taking a little bit of a more head-on approach, declaring, unproven hearsay, things like that, whenever they are, talking to reporters about this. Hearsay is in the names and other information that could be said about those names and these Epstein records. So I think that definitely Trump is sort of getting a little bit of extra shield cover because he said he's been worried about phony stuff about other people, but also potentially, in his words, phony stuff about him.
So, Kaylin, I'm reminded in the wake of the fallout between President Trump and Elon Musk, you'll remember that very day Elon Musk was profusely posting there on X. One of those posts from Musk, we'll remember, was essentially bringing this fact up that the reason President Trump and the DOJ had not released the Epstein files yet was because Trump was named in them. So I thought that's just interesting context we have to remind the viewers about. Does this open up President Trump to more scrutiny, more liability amongst his base of supporters who, during the campaign and then when he was elected, he and so many around him vowed to get to the bottom of the Epstein saga? Now that we know officially, according to these reports, that he, at least his name, is in some of these files, does that undercut that effort at all?
Well, certainly with this story, it's sort of one of those it remains to be seen kind of answers week after week because we've constantly had some change ups ever since the July 7th, July 6th memo came out that was displeasing to many people in the public. We've seen the Trump administration after the first Wall Street Journal story came out, the one with the allegations of the body letter given to Epstein for his 50th birthday, allegedly by Trump. That was when we started to see Todd Blanche become Donald Trump's sort of person to take care of the Epstein situation. That's whenever he started to make the motions for 3 separate courts. One now that has denied requests for grand jury transcripts. We started to see those requests being put out there. And now we know that he's going to be speaking with Ghislaine Maxwell and her attorney, David Oscar Marcus, in the coming days about what can be done to sort of get more information out there. We did see today that there was a judge in New York that denied Maxwell's request to see some of those grand jury transcripts from her case beforehand. So we are seeing a little bit of development in her case there. And it still seems like that with everything happening and now the House Oversight Committee wanting to subpoena Maxwell, everything is still kind of hinging on this conversation between Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and Maxwell and what's going to come of this. I think a lot of people should be, sort of waiting with bated breath as, what's going to happen with this conversation between Ghislaine's attorney and Todd Blanche.
Yeah, you cited last week's piece, major bombshell in the Wall Street Journal about this birthday letter Trump sent to Epstein back in 2003. And just a note for our viewers here, the Wall Street Journal, obviously, it shares common ownership with Fox, though. Fox has not independently confirmed the truth of that specific report here. Let's get to the other news of the day. You mentioned this federal judge down there in Florida who denied a request from the Trump administration to release these grand jury transcripts from an investigation into the disgraced financier, Jeffrey Epstein. That was a very quick denial. That's how the Associated Press describes it. It came in response to a request by the government last week asking the court to unseal those documents and to transfer the case to New York. Is the Trump administration going to appeal that decision? Why was this so quick from this federal judge? What was the federal judge citing as a reason for the denial? Why not unseal these grand jury transcripts? What did he say?
Well, so there's a long-standing 11th Circuit precedent that essentially, as the judge put it, was sort of tying their hands on being able to do anything on the request that was being asked of. That Blanche was essentially saying, we want this for the public interest. The public really wants to see these files. But because there wasn't any apparent reason that this would be used for any other judicial proceedings other than public transparency, the judge was at least leaning on some longstanding precedent that was sort of, saying, well, we're not going to be using this for any other case. This isn't really going to be actually applicable to anything that's going to be used for a prosecution. So what are we doing here? So I do think that it is, a fast denial on this. Whether it gets appealed remains to be seen. I think that, the fact that this came from the oldest existing Epstein case is something that's rather interesting about it, and definitely because we know of the agreement that essentially Epstein was given, and the short 13-month sentence that he served, despite having the prostitution solicitation charges that were levied against him. It definitely seems like this is the case that some people would want to get the most out of, because it dates back to the earliest crimes that he was accused of. So, definitely remains to be seen, but we'll, stand by for any appeals if they happen.
Yeah, the judge in the case, Robin Rosenberg, wrote that the court's hands are tied. The government had not requested the grand jury's findings for use in a judicial proceeding. She wrote, adding that district courts are generally prohibited from unsealing grand jury testimony except in narrow circumstances. We had discussed that at the time with some of our legal analysts and experts, that there had to be a good reason, there has to be a good reason, or even a federal judge to sign off on the release of grand jury testimony here. And now out to Capitol Hill. So now a dual track effort being undertaken, one by Todd Blanche and the DOJ to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, another there on Capitol Hill to do the same. We learned today House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer issuing a subpoena to Ghislaine Maxwell for a deposition to occur on August the 11th at the Federal Correctional Institution, where Maxwell is serving a 20-year sentence. That's in Tallahassee. Kaylin, have you spoken to anyone on the Hill, on the Oversight Committee there? What do they want to ask Maxwell? What can she offer?
So it's an interesting request. From what I've seen from the release that came out of the Oversight Committee, they're seeking to learn, testimony that could inform the consideration of, quote, potential legislative solutions to improve federal efforts to combat sex trafficking and reform the use of non-prosecution agreements and or plea agreements. So it's very specific language here that we're getting from the committee's request. And I think that, essentially they're wanting to, frame this in a way that, is relevant to, future, as they're calling them, reforms, but also things that could elicit more information from Miss Maxwell about, some of the things that she was involved with Epstein. Essentially, we're asking you relevant questions that might, bring up potential, things that happened in the past. I think that is sort of the effort from what I'm, reading. But, this is, again, I get back to that point where everyone should be sort of waiting with bated breath about what happens with this conversation with the Deputy Attorney General and Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney, David Oscar Marcus, because it really depends on what happens with those discussions that we're not going to be privy to. We're not going to be in the room, but we're going to at least know that they're happening soon, if not, already in the process of it at this very moment. And we've seen basically that type of statement coming from Marcus saying that, it's going to be a big if, she agrees to testify and not take the fifth. And it will be dependent on what is able to happen with these conversations with the Deputy Attorney General, which definitely raises the stakes from, what we've seen for just, it's very important to underscore the fact that the Deputy Attorney General is even talking to a defendant like this is very rare. It's something that we don't see every day. And there's been a lot of speculation coming up from it. What could potentially happen? Is there going to be some kind of agreement that comes down for Maxwell? Like, what is she going to get out of talking to the government? I mean, that's, a very, very, again, high stakes question, because, I think a lot of people wouldn't want to see this defendant get any sort of, time served agreement or, commutation or something to her sentence, because she's, facing very serious charges and was convicted. Right. So definitely high stakes conversations happening there.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting question. What does Ghislaine Maxwell get out of some of these meetings? And to your point, it's extremely rare because she's trying to appeal her conviction there. Kaylin, while we have you, in all fairness, there is yet another kind of dual story going on as well in Washington. And this was all started by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, making some claims about former President Barack Obama, unveiling and releasing some of the intelligence that was gathered and collected during the 2016 election, that election, of course, between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, to suggest, and that was the conventional wisdom that has formed over time, that Russian President Vladimir Putin and also the Kremlin were essentially influencing the election, though they did not manipulate any votes that were cast, in order to favor Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton. Live picture there at the White House. And so we do have to ask these questions because these are two stories from the early 20-teens that are now front and center yet again in the mid-2020s, which I find so interesting. Barack Obama has responded to this effort via a spokesperson. We showed our viewers the statement yesterday. I think it's worth showing it again. So this is how Obama has come down on this. This is his spokesperson, Patrick Rodenbush. And he says this, that out of respect for the office of the presidency, our office does not normally dignify the constant nonsense and misinformation flowing out of this White House with a response. But these claims are outrageous enough to merit one. These bizarre allegations are ridiculous and a weak attempt at distraction. Nothing in the document issued last week undercuts the widely accepted conclusion that Russia worked to influence the 2016 presidential election, but did not successfully manipulate any votes. These findings were affirmed in a 2020 report by the bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee, led by then Chairman Marco Rubio. And then today, Kaylin, we were all treated to DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, at the White House press briefing, taking questions on this very story. And remember, she has said that she has referred criminally a former president to the DOJ over this. What basis does she have to do that? And I thought we just had a Supreme Court decision brought by Trump last summer, that unanimous ruling saying presidents and former presidents, they have immunity when it comes to alleged crimes committed while in office. Where do we go from here, Kayla?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to take in, and especially whenever we're getting the message straight from DNI that the Obama administration allegedly was in the very high up rafters, including up to the president himself, was allegedly promoting this contrived narrative, all on the basis of trying to, basically distance any sort of, problems or, predicaments that might surround, Clinton's campaign, and make, basically the full brunt of criticism in the media apparatus go up against Donald Trump. It's essentially a grand conspiracy that is being alleged here. And ironically, in order for there to be any actual criminal charges that would maybe be up against, let's just be more realistic and down to earth here, because, maybe it could be against, former FBI Director James Comey or former CIA Director John Brennan, because those are the people that have been, at least by this administration, under the investigation of by the FBI the longest. Now, we're not even going to get into other specific names, but let's just talk about those two figures. Every single thing that could potentially be brought against them seems to be, at least from what we are able to tell, out of this 5-year statute of limitations. So in essence, what would have to come if there was going to be any sort of charges by the Justice Department is a strung together narrative at play here that would show that there was a conspiracy across all agencies of the federal government.
Okay, so
at least the intelligence, apparatus, to essentially bring about, turmoil and against the Trump administration, and essentially take a look at these intelligence reports that hadn't even been verified yet, and make them more. Give them more credit before you'd actually done the homework and made sure that they actually had credit, which we know that they didn't. So
Kayla, I just want to interrupt. So what Tulsi Gabbard is claiming is that at the direction of then President Obama, Obama doctored and manipulated intelligence to make it seem like the Russians favored Trump in the 2016 presidential election. That is what is the issue here, correct?
Yeah, it's a very grand claim for her to be doing this. I mean, and it's also, it's just something that is going to be incredibly difficult to get a DC judge to sign off on an indictment like this if it were to ever become one. And we're starting to see at least the Justice Department, before it was through reports and, confidential sources, but now we're seeing a task force, so to speak, that the DOJ has announced that they're going to be taking a look at all this evidence. So they're coming at it from a very soft approach. They're saying we're going to create this task force to look at the evidence and see what all is there, and then make a legal determination at a later date. So the Justice Department is using incredibly soft language to discuss the DNI findings, but it is alarming from the standpoint of what if they decide to go further? Then what is a judge in the nation's capital going to say about this? Because I think that there would be a number of potential hurdles that this administration could face from the legal side, notwithstanding all the political arguments that could be made. As we know, Donald Trump was talking about the weaponization of justice against him during the 2024 run. And I think that from the Democratic perspective, they could use the same exact allegation to be made, because obviously we see a lot of pushback from Democrats, including the Obama office, that they see this as nonsense.
Y'all, if it's not one thing, it's another. So they are saying that Trump is actually in those Epstein files and he was notified by Pam Bondi. Well, here's the deal. When he was running for, his reelection, that is when he promised to release the files. But what they're saying is when he became president, that's when he was notified that he is actually in the Epstein files. So you guys have a whole freak for president.